Your car is making you broke, and you might not even recognize it.
Like, if you're a broke boy, just say so.
In this video, we're gonna discuss why your car is making you poorer than you realize, and what you can do to save thousands of dollars per year by making just a few good decisions before you buy. So to start off, let's discuss a bigger picture and describe the average American and what they spend money on today. According to NerdWallet, the average American spends $13,174 annually per year in transportation alone. Considering the average American income back in 2023 was $80,610 pre-tax, after tax, which let's say for this example is 10%, which is on the conservative side, the post-tax income a family makes is around $72,000. So the average American family spends about 18% of their annual post-tax income on transportation alone. What's even crazier is that lower income families spend almost 30% of their annual post-tax income on transportation. And that is a huge amount of money, especially considering how often we spend our time in cars, which is usually just for commuting or going to the grocery store. So I've been saying transportation costs a lot, so what's actually in these transportation costs? Transportation costs include several things. We're talking about car payments, maintenance, fuel, insurance, and lastly, parking and other tolls. These numbers are pretty shocking to me. So today we're gonna be talking about why this one expense is taking such a financial burden on your financial freedom and future retirement savings. So the first category we need to talk about are car payments. There's a forever debate on whether you should buy a new versus used car. But looking at a purely financial lens, which this channel is all about, we need to talk about this depreciation graph. So let's talk about car depreciation first. Car depreciation is simply the rate at which your vehicle loses its value over time. Some cars depreciate faster or slower than others. It just depends on certain variables. Such things include the mileage, the wear and tear on the car, the size, the fuel economy, and other things not in your control, such as consumer taste. Here's a list of historically the worst depreciating cars and the list of the least depreciating cars. But on average, a new car just after 5 years loses about 60% of its value. And the way that most cars depreciate, they'll depreciate quickly in the beginning of their lifetime. So for example, the first year you own a car, your car is expected to lose about 20% of its value. So the reason in buying used cars, so you skip most of the depreciation that happens in the first couple of years. And then when you buy your used car, your car will still depreciate, but not at the rate of a new car. So buying a used car skips most of the depreciation that happens during the first couple of years. And honestly, buying a 3 to 4 year used car will have most of the same features as buying a brand spanking new car. It might have different lights, a little bit of an older interior, and maybe the body shape might be a little bit different, but more or less they are probably about 70% of the same car. So based on that argument, I would buy a used car every single time. One thing to note in buying a used car is that you still need to make sure and do your due diligence that you're still buying a great car. I would recommend to get a mechanic to check out the car before actually making the purchase, as well as doing your due diligence, running the Carfax, making sure repairs and maintenance were done on time, and honestly, maybe even doing a background check of the owner itself. To further emphasize my point on buying a used versus new car, let's do this quick exercise on using Edmunds' true cost to own calculator, where you can find that link in the description. So let's take a 2024 new BMW 3 Series versus a 4-year-old, same model BMW 330i, and let's compare the difference on the true cost to own. First off, a 2020 BMW 3 Series, the total cash price is about $25,000. You can see that owning this car, it'll still depreciate a decent amount. So 5 years from now, it'll depreciate about $13,000. There's a significant amount of maintenance at almost $13,000, and even repairs at almost $10,000. And fuel is also pretty expensive, about $14,000. If we take that same model and compare the 2024 new version, the total cash price is now at $49,853. Almost 2 times the price than that 2020 version. And as you can see, the depreciation is a lot more. You're looking at almost $27,000 in depreciation alone after 5 years. Obviously, because it's a new car, the repairs and maintenance are a little bit less. The maintenance is not that much less, it's still $8,000, but the repairs are definitely a lot less at $3,000. Fuel is about the same, but again, that depreciation is ginormous compared to the 2020 version. This 2024 3 Series costs about $75,000 true cost to own, whereas the 2020 version, still really significant, but it's $10,000 less at $65,000 to true cost to own. I would play around with this calculator if I was you, see, what cars you're interested in and really see how much it costs to truly own the car. So we discussed the new versus used argument, but there's another thing you need to have when buying a new car. And that is a mindset or framework you need to have when buying your next car. One big thing people fall into is that they'll buy a car and they'll keep it for maybe 3-4 years, get bored of it, and then switch. That is a huge no-no. And honestly, I think this affects your financial outlook more than that new versus used argument, because the timeline in which you hold your car is so much more important. So when I'm looking to buy a new car, I'm looking to keep this car for 10 years minimum, ideally 15 plus years. Why is that important? So holding a car for that long is important because you spread the cost of owning that car over that period in which you hold it. So for example, if you were to buy a car, let's say you finance a car for a 5-year period, after fully paying off that car, you're still left with 5 years extra where you don't have to make those car payments. You can start recouping some of that money back, and you can start taking that saved money and putting it elsewhere, other areas of opportunity where you can actually grow, such as S&P 500, bonds, whatever. Not only that, when you buy a new car, there's a bunch of transaction costs associated with buying a new car, such as getting a new title, paying tax on that car, and even documentation fees. Honestly, when I look to buy a car, my plan for the next car is basically to hold it until it's done with its lifeline, AKA just running it into the ground. Honestly, when I look to buy a car, the main thing I look for isn't really depreciation or the fact that the car holds its value. That's obviously a plus. But the thing I look for is actually the reliability, especially at those high mileage. I want to make sure the car is reliably going to get to 150,000 plus miles. And honestly, when I took my next car into consideration, there's not that many car brands that can build their cars that reliably, especially up to 200,000 miles. There's only Honda, Toyota, and their luxury counterparts, Acura and Lexus. Next thing we need to look into when it comes to transportation costs is the car maintenance. So for maintenance, again, you can use the Edmunds True Cost Calculator to really find how much you're going to need to spend on maintenance to reliably run your car. But for this video, the way you can cut costs on maintenance a little bit is a couple of things. Number one is going with a dealership versus independent mechanic. So dealership mechanics are generally more expensive. There's more overhead on dealerships, and the mechanics are more specialized as they only deal with that particular brand most of the time. On the other hand, for an independent mechanic, usually they are more mom and pop shops. They serve a more general selection of brands rather than focusing on a specific brand. So most independent mechanics will mainly focus on JDM cars or Japanese domestically made cars, or like European cars, or a little mixture of both. It just depends. Most mechanics most likely use aftermarket parts instead of the OEM parts that are made in the factory. One thing I will say about this is that if your warranty covers maintenance to be made with the dealership, use the warranty dealership fully. Usually you'll have free or heavily discounted maintenance from the dealership if you're under warranty. So utilize that to its fullest. And one thing to note is that if you actually use an independent mechanic while your car is still under warranty, you can actually void your warranty if that happens. So use the dealership mechanic up until the lifetime of the warranty. Once that warranty ends, I would start looking for a good independent mechanic. To find one, Yelp is your friend, I would say. Get referrals from a friend, but make sure you get a good one. Some independent mechanics have a reputation of being a little slimy, so make sure you do your due diligence, make sure you look at a bunch of reviews, make sure they're not fake, and you'll be saving a lot more money for the same exact jobs if you were to go to an independent mechanic versus a dealership mechanic. For some of the smaller regular maintenance, such as oil changes, fluids, definitely do yourself. Just look at YouTube or Google at what fluid you need to buy and follow the tutorial online. For oil changes, you can also do yourself. I've done it myself, but honestly, I recommend just like going to Jiffy Lube, Valvoline, or even like Walmart. It's not that I can't do it myself, it's just that when you do change your oil yourself, you actually have to discard the oil at a proper place, and so you have to drive somewhere. So at that point, you might as well just drive somewhere and they dispose the oil for you, and they do the job for you as well. They're definitely gonna be charging a little bit of a markup, but for the time savings, I just recommend go with these large chains. These large chains are highly commoditized. So one thing I like to add is make sure you go on their website to find coupons. Usually they'll have some type of coupons that you can print and use in the store itself. Another big tip is that these large chains will usually try to upsell you when you're there. So make sure you are saying no to the upsell Do your research before, know exactly what oil you're getting, what the oil life is, and how long that oil life usually lasts, because most of these large places will try to upsell you, especially if you're a woman and you're not as knowledgeable as in, men. So know what you want before, get in and out. Let's talk about the next transportation cost, which is fuel. Fuel is fairly straightforward, but now in this modern day, we also have electricity, or for EVs, that you have to take into consideration. For fuel, again, you can use Edmunds True Cost to Own calculator, but if you want to look at more granular detail, you can use this fuel calculator that I have. Again, link in the bio. You can compare vehicle A versus vehicle B based on the model, or you can just put their MPG manually, but it can show you the 10-year savings of fuel alone. So in this example, I chose a 2024 Toyota Prius, which obviously makes crazy MPG at 57 MPG versus a Camaro at 22 MPG. And so assuming that you drive 15,000 miles a year, 55% in city, and plan to keep the vehicle for 10 years, at this average California gas price, which is disgusting by the way, is $4.53 per gallon, you're looking at a 10-year saving of almost $20,000. That's insane. Fuel economy does add up over time. Just saving almost $2,000 yearly is a large chunk of change for most families. So really take that into account when you're buying your next car. Again, you can do the same thing with EVs. It's a little harder to calculate as you need to know your kilowatt hour rate. That also varies depending on what electricity plan you have. Some will charge a much lower kilowatt hour rate in the wee hours of night, so like 2 a.m. So this EV one's a little bit harder to calculate, but in general, EV is cheaper than gas. But I would argue that there are more things in looking at fuel economy for the EV versus gas argument. Next category for transportation costs is insurance. According to Bankrate, the average car insurance premium in the United States is $2,458 per year. So first off, let's talk about auto insurance. Auto insurance covers 3 basic things. Number 1, property. So your auto insurance will cover if your car gets vandalized or if there's a theft to your car. Number 2 is liability, if there has been some property damage or somebody in your car was injured. And lastly, medical. That's the cost of treating injuries, broken bone, rehab, physical therapy, and even lost wages. So auto insurance is important. I definitely recommend you to get auto insurance. I think it's illegal in most states. And so if you want to lower this, there are a couple things you can do. So the first thing to note is that insurance prices usually increase every single year, not only for the insurance company to make more money, but also they have to account for inflation, which makes sense. So if you want to make sure your rate stays the same or even lowers, the first thing you can do is shop around for other insurance providers. Every single year, use the same coverage you have for your current insurance plan and just call around to other providers in your state. You can find other providers with Bankrate or NerdWallet. There's a list of providers in their state, and they even have reviews on each one. But just call around. You'll get quotes that are most likely lower than your current rate, and you can see how much money you're really leaving on the table. So once you shop around and get other competitive quotes, you have 2 options. So number 1 is to actually move insurance companies to the one that give you a lower rate. So make sure you're moving to a reputable company, check the reviews. And option number 2 is that if you want to stay with your current provider, you can use the competitive rates as leverage to either lower your current rate or keep it the exact same. These insurance companies make tons of money off you because essentially, and their whole company is essentially a big math problem where like income they get from your insurance premium just has to be a little bit more than the claims they give out for crashes and such. So they make tons of money off you and they're willing to do whatever it takes to keep you as a customer. For me, I'm actually lucky because I have USAA. I'm not an active military member myself, but my dad is a veteran. So USAA offers some pretty decently priced premiums with decent coverage. So I haven't found a quote that's a little bit less than USAA, but I still check every single year. But the last portion of transportation costs is parking and tolls. And the one tip I would give here is that number 1, do not spend valet whatsoever. I don't know, valet is just a crazy concept to me, like literally dropping off your car for somebody to drive it and park for $30 or more just to eat at a nice restaurant. I mean, I do that once in a while just because my fiance actually gets mad at me when I don't do valet. She's like, why are you such a cheapo? But if I were eating at a place alone, I would just find, a public parking garage or even street parking if you can find that. One recommendation I like to give is that if you're eating out at a really nice place, use Waze to navigate you to your location. Waze actually gives you a bunch of parking options when you're at your destination, and I believe they also give the prices as well. Tolls, on the other hand, I totally understand tolls, especially if you're commuting to work and there's heavy traffic. Totally understand paying for such a service. I guess one recommendation I get is try to find somebody you can carpool with. Again, not only will you able to get into the toll lanes, but in California, you can also get into carpool lane if you do have somebody in your car. Here in California, if you're on a toll lane and have either 2 or 3 people in your car, you can get that toll completely waived. You can save a little bit more money on your commute. In addition, you also have people you can commute with, so it's less boring, and you're reducing your carbon footprint and saving the environment. Let me know what car you're considering to buy in the comments below, and I'll either roast you or praise you for a good decision. See you in the next one. Peace.